Today we continue with the Mahavidyas, and with one of the Mahavidyas, which is maybe the most special and definitely quite an impressive image, Chinnamasta, the one who cuts off her own head. That's actually literally what Chinnamasta means. So, yes, you see a lady, supposed to be also quite young, always naked. That also has a meaning. She cuts off her own head. And then the main thing that you see is that from the neck come 3 streams of blood, but actually they are streams of energy. They are the famous 3 main energy channels in our body, called Ida, Pingala and Sushumna: the solar energy, the lunar energy, and the neutral energy. And so her own head is drinking that neutral energy from the center, which is the pure Kundalini energy. And her Shaktis, attendants, they are then drinking the lunar and solar. That also has a meaning in terms of what happens really in meditation. And Peter Weltevrede, who made this painting, he did not do what most artists would do. That is, that they would paint Chinnamasta dancing on the bodies of a couple that is making love. Mostly Kama and Ratri, the god and goddess of pleasure. Sometimes also Radha Krishna or some other couple of Hindu gods and goddesses. And so then on the right you see the yantra, which has very little color, only black and white and a bit of yellow. Very serious she is, Chinnamasta, looking in that way very black and white, And you can also see in the surrounding mandala that Peter gave the symbols of, below the third eye, where these 3 channels meet, And then on the left you have the lunar, and the right you have the solar. And on top then, that is a typical symbol for the 7th chakra, where ultimately then the Kundalini, Sushumna, leaves the body. This is the basic imagery. Chinnamasta is often called also Prachanda Chandika, which refers to Kali. Chandika is another name of Kali, but it actually means the most fierce Kali. So she is a warrior like Tripur Bhairavi that we saw last time, but even more strong, and also dealing with something which is a lot more vital in the whole process of yoga than Tripur Bhairavi. You will remember Tripur Bhairavi, she deals with the 9 impediments of mind, inability to stay in a particular yogic state, inability to concentrate, all these things that are problems of mind, laziness, and so on. So obviously first we have to deal with that, but then comes a more final step, that is the cutting off of the head, which basically means that we remove our consciousness from the body. Sometimes you can see other interpretations, removing the body from the mind, but actually the body-mind is one thing. And actually the body is no problem at all. It only becomes a problem in connection to the mind. And so the real cutting is between pure consciousness and individual consciousness, which comes from association with the body, which is something done by mind. So in that way, what she really represents is the most deep state of meditation, the state of Samadhi, where there is no more thinking at all, there's even no more awareness of being in the body, there is only pure consciousness. And so that is what she represents. In that way, she is the last, you could say, of the Mahavidyas. No? She is not coming here in last order or something. Actually, in last order comes Kamala, which is a form of Lakshmi, very nice, beautiful, enjoyable, everything you want, really. But so there's a reason, we'll come to that when we talk about it, that she is there last. You could say she is the ultimate goal, no? In that way. But when it comes to yogic practice, then definitely Chinnamasta comes last. She is really about killing the false self, killing the ego, and in that way truly bringing forward the self. No? Those who know a little bit my teachings, I don't really like the whole idea of killing the ego, because I think the ego is something very natural. But in order to truly manifest the divine form of the ego, first you have to kill it. That is the truth. No? You have to kill it so that it is totally away, so that the divine can totally manifest in unmanifested form. And then, like the phoenix rising from the ashes, the new ego can be reborn and can be something totally okay and spiritual and totally in balance with the self. So, but anyhow, to do that job is not a small thing. You do have to be able to let go of everything to which you are attached. No? That is the ego. No? And once you start working on that, you discover that it has many, many layers, many subconscious layers that have to be worked with. So it's not a simple process. And what here is also very much symbolized there, disconnecting to the body, meaning also disconnecting to the pleasure derived from the senses. That is where this couple comes in the picture that you often see with Chinnamasta. This is not a moral thing. This is not something against sexuality, but very clearly, if we want to not just reach a little bit of Samadhi, which maybe some of you already are doing, but really stay there for a very long time, then we need to have very different relationship, let's say, to our senses. We cannot be as sense-oriented as is normal in life. No? It's actually what Chinnamasta is doing is quite abnormal. No? And then definitely sex being maybe the greatest joy that we can get out of the senses, then that needs to be set aside also for a time. And that has a very particular reason also, which is Ojas. No? Ojas being a very subtle form of energy inside of us. And this subtle form easily gets exhausted. No? And one of the ways in which it gets easily exhausted is through using the senses. And the way in which it gets most easily exhausted is in sex. Especially for the male, but also for the female. But in the male this is even more so, because the sperm has a lot of ojas. Ojas is like a magical, energetic liquid, you can say, which has a lot of life force. So to keep the sperm alive outside of the body, a lot of ojas is being given to it. So there, if we aim really at staying in Samadhi for a very long time, at going into very deep stages of Samadhi, then we need to have enough ojas in the body. And when we are young, that is not so much a problem, but the older we get, the more our juice is drying up, my teacher used to say. And so the more we have to be careful there and guard it well, and guard this inside of us. Because when we go in the deeper stages of Samadhi, then breath will stop, right? It will not just slow down. It will really stop. And so then the body will survive because of ojas. It will use the prana stored in ojas to keep alive the body, while you are away. You must see that in that state, we have not so much talked about it, maybe a little bit in that class on Samadhi I have talked about it, but in the deeper states of Samadhi, we are really, you could say, like hibernating. And the body becomes cold, and the heartbeat stops, and the breath stops, everything stops, and you are not there anymore. I mean, we can discuss whether we are here anyhow, to begin with. That is also a story, but you can certainly say that in normal situation, okay, we are also in spiritual world, but we are very strongly connected here, and some, you could say, of our energy is here, but in Samadhi, no. In Samadhi, there's only a very thin connection that is kept, of course, so that we can return. No worry about that, actually. It is there. But for the rest, we are gone, and the body has to be able to take care of itself. Yeah, this main relationship there between Chinnamasta and sexuality is there, and maybe sometimes also a little bit exaggerated, like it's not only about that. But definitely Chinnamasta is being worshipped quite a lot for people who want to do sexual abstinence. They don't want to get involved in that, and they ask help from Chinnamasta with that. And in this way, the worship of Chinnamasta is said to be non-suitable for householders, because householders live in the life and normally have a partner and so on. So, of course, at an older age, it is still possible, let's say, when that sexual game has stopped. But as long as we still desire sex, then it is said better not to work with Chinnamasta. And I would not take it so lightly, this story, because once upon a time, after Harish Johari left his body, there was a man from America contacting the family and complaining that after reading the book Tools for Tantra, he was starting some meditation on Chinnamasta, using the yantra that was there in the book, like literally cutting it out and putting it in a frame. And he complained that he became impotent as a result of that practice. Now, I don't know, these things are quite complicated, so actually the family was quite embarrassed by the whole thing and asked me to look into it. So I had some contact with this person. In that I also discovered that he was actually quite addicted to porn and was doing this sadhana because he hoped it would help him, to lose that addiction. But quite clearly from his story, that did not work. So then you are in quite a bad situation, where you're asking the help to stop getting involved with these things, but then you can't. You don't have the willpower. Even maybe with the help you get, I don't know. What he really did, I don't know. But so, just to say that we should not be worshipped so lightly, you really have to be ready to leave all that. And then with Chinnamasta, you are anyhow on a path which is not going to take just 1 month, Nobody should start any worshipping of Chinnamasta only for 40 days or 3 months or something like that. No? With the others, that is quite possible, with the other Mahavidyas. But here, no. This is for life till the end of life. This is a very serious step that you are taking. No? So don't do this very lightly. And the main thing to understand is that, yes, if you want to be able to stay for a long time in deep meditation, your ojas needs to be preserved. And that has many aspects. Even food plays a role. Pranayama plays a big role. You can really increase your ojas by proper pranayamas, by especially the long exhales. They are very good for creating more ojas and may also help people then who have chronic fatigue or other problems in health. Ojas is like health in a bottle, you know, it's like very, very powerful there. So whenever there is a weakness, a tiredness, something which cannot get resolved, then these longer pranayamas with long exhales are very advisable. But so in this case here, it's not about health, it's about deep meditation. And this stage where the heartbeat goes, where the breath goes, this is really not what you will experience at first when you enter Samadhi. That is still coming later, because that really requires that your attention and also then the prana is totally withdrawn from the level of the body, from the not just the earth element, which is the principal element of the body, but from all matter, from the total of 5 elements, from earth, but also from water, from fire, from air, from akash. And then we talked about it, I think last time, we come to this super element or, original element from which all elements came, Mahatattva. That is then where the whole body system stops, and you go into a kind of hibernation, which we can compare to a death of the body. But okay, it's still alive on a very low level, you can say. And then people can be there for a very long time. I've myself seen people being there for many days at a time, and it is well known that there have been people like that who've been like that for months and years, without coming out of it, without eating anything, without drinking anything, without doing anything. These are known. Sometimes they find somebody like that. A few years back, there was quite a young man actually found in the place you may have seen on YouTube. He was attracting big crowds, and I think it took about 1 year, and then there was so many crowds around it and so much, typical Indian hectic stuff going around it, that one night he disappeared. I don't know if you also saw that. He must have thought, this is too much now, I'm going some other place. I don't know what he did. But anyhow, so these things exist, and so this is where we are talking here. And so the natural element related to Chinnamasta is lightning, or to put it maybe in a more general way, electricity. Because, okay, lightning we don't find everywhere all the time in nature. That's more a thing that comes and goes, actually. But electricity is always there. It's already there in the atoms, the electrons. They are actually what we call electricity, the movement of the electrons. So like fire, like space, like time, electricity is one of these things that is there in the universe, in manifestation, eternally, never changing. I mean, of course, on a local level, yes, sure, the amount can change and the behavior can change and all that, but the essential thing will always remain the same, and which is there also very much in our body, and which is prana. No, let's just be clear about that. I have said when we talked about Kali that time is also prana. Time is the life force, I said. Because without the life, there's no time. No? And without time, there also can be no life. No? So both are totally interconnected. But if we look at it a little bit more in a, you could say, material way, then prana is electricity. No? It's an energy. It's a life force. And so this is also what comes here. And in that way, Chinnamasta is called Vidyut Shakti, the Shakti of Kundalini. The Shakti of the Kundalini energy, which is the most pure form of prana. Prana, you can say, is the raw form, the raw energy. When we inhale it through breathing, then in the body it can also create many other kinds of energy, many other kinds of prana, you could say. And then one of those is this famous Kundalini energy, which is the energy of the self. And there's a lot of talk about it, because it's a very inspiring subject somehow, Kundalini. And it's good to know about it. But, yeah, better let it do its work naturally than try to force it. Because to force it is possible, but that again requires not just a little change of mind, it changes totally your life. And most of us, we are not up to that. And anyhow, it is also not needed to force it. It also has disadvantages to force it. The best way is if the Kundalini energy can rise naturally. So maybe first I need to explain a bit what that means, right? So, in the spine, there are channels where energy flows, electricity. A very important system in our body. You can say that it is the central system of our body. But then deep inside that spine, there is a very thin channel called the Brahma Nadi. You can say it is so thin that only the purest energy or the purest electricity can flow through it. And that is then the Kundalini. So when we start working with yoga, even just with asana, with pranayama, or with meditation, with mantra, with all these things, and we observe the energy in our body and in our spine, we can feel, many movements, and maybe sometimes more cold currents and sometimes more hot currents, and all kinds of things that happen. But all that is not Kundalini. All that is just prana in different forms. And some of these practices that are then called Kundalini Yoga, but actually are just pranic exercises, they are very good, they are very cleaning, they can, like unblock certain channels, nadis, that is all very good, but that is not yet Kundalini rising, the snake that is locked there in the first chakra, rising up through the chakras to reach the end point here. That is a different thing. And in any case, when you go into Samadhi, that will happen. That is not something you have to do. That will anyhow happen. And as the energy rises there, your consciousness, you could say, will also rise. It will rise above the elements, it will rise above the senses, and you will get a total different kind of consciousness, a much more pure kind of consciousness, because this energy has, come first here, and then in the journey from here to here, that is where Samadhi is happening. And so that is what we aim at. But as I said, that is not something which we have to do. Like Samadhi also is not something which we have to do. We just have to create the, like conditions in which it can happen, and then it will happen. But a more forceful method is also there, which is the essence of Kundalini Yoga. And there actually, it's a bit of a complicated story, but to make it simple, we have two kinds of prana which are opposite. You could say opposite in electrical charge. One is positive, one is negative. They are called prana and apana. Apana normally helps in urination, defecation, everything which leaves the body on the bottom. So those two energies, after purification, they are brought together in fourth chakra through very specific pranayamas. And because we bring together these two opposites, that creates a great power. Like you could say, it creates a great combustion or explosion or something like that. And then this force that we create there awakens the snake, and pushes the Kundalini through that thin Brahmanadi all the way up, or as far up, okay, as you get it. But so that is what then is referred to as actual Kundalini Yoga. And Harish Johari, my original teacher, he was very much a Kundalini yogi. So he learned these things directly from his father. It's one of the best ways, I think. And he wrote then also this book called The Chakras, which came out quite early, you can say, in the West. And in that way, he was asked many times by many people if he wanted to teach them this Kundalini Yoga, because he was talking about it in the book. And he always said, yes, I can teach you, but you have to come to India, and then I can teach you there. And then when people asked how long time did they have to come, then he usually would say, minimum 3 years. 1 year for purification, 1 year for learning certain techniques, and then the third year to start working with this Kundalini Yoga, and maybe then get some result after 1 year, which then you can take home and proceed further on your own. So it's a very long process. And he also indicated sometimes that the fact that our bodies are more polluted than they used to be in the old days makes it even more difficult. But so this purification first, these are the so-called kshat karmas, is very important. Without it, he totally advised against doing anything like that. Because when the channels are impure and we start forcing energy through, then a lot of things can go wrong. And aside from any physical ailments that may also be caused by it, it is also known to create sometimes mental problems, but quite serious mental problems. And this is not to be taken lightly. I have treated people like that. And these people all could very clearly connect those mental problems to some Kundalini techniques that they had been doing. And these techniques then, were learned somewhere, but not in a 3-year process like my teacher Harish Johari was explaining, but more in a weekend workshop or some other, maybe a little bit longer workshop, but still nothing very, very serious. And one of those people, just to, make you understand what I'm talking about, he was already a little bit old, but very clever, talking very normal, very wise. But suddenly, in the middle of the talk, he'd start shouting something, totally unrelated to this talk. It's really a very serious problem he had. I couldn't help him even. And then some other people also I've treated, maybe a little bit less serious problems, but very clearly this was not the problem that they had before. This came by doing these very forceful pranayamas. So, okay, Kundalini is not something we just, play with. And that's sometimes a little bit the problem with many of these things now. No? People just fool around with it. Like with spirit world also, people are just fooling around and then bearing the consequences. I see that quite a lot. So this is not a good idea. And as I said, if you can reach Samadhi, and for that actually you don't need so much guidance, you don't need so much a teacher being always close by and watching you. This is something you can very safely do. And there, if you reach it and you go a little bit more deep, automatically the Kundalini will rise. And Harish Johari always also pointed out that when it happens in that way, then whatever you reach there, it will be secure. Not just meaning it will not create any problem, but meaning that whatever state then is reached will not just again disappear. Because that is also a problem with the forceful method. You have to see that to move the energy up through the chakras means that you, go beyond the basic desires of the chakras. But so, if you are going beyond the desire of first chakra, which is to survive, you become a totally different kind of being, But if that is premature, if still in your subconscious there is quite a lot of fear of death, but suddenly you feel totally beyond that, that's going to create problems. And ultimately, these subconscious fears are going to pull you back. And you're going to again lose whatever you have gained there. Only some memory you will have of it that may be helpful. Anyhow, if we experience something in Samadhi also, afterwards, in a way, also again we lose it. And we have the memory of it. And the main thing is that it will have changed something in our feeling, in our subconscious feeling. So same here, I'm not saying it will not bring them anything, but if it is forceful, then when they afterwards, then they will lose a lot more than if it happens naturally. So Harish Johari very much advised us to rather look at that part and to work with the system of the chakras is also a very good preparation for that. And for the people who like that part, there is the very good book of Harish Johari about the chakras, which explains it quite well, and it's also not so difficult. These are meditations on different colors, on different shapes, and also, of course, with different sounds that are related to the chakras. And he also has an audio CD available with those sounds so that you can learn them in a proper way and that you can start working with this as part of your practice. And there also, please read it properly so that you understand that this is not about going through the chakras, like in a 10-minute sequence. This is about working with first chakra for at least some months. And, with these sounds, with these colors, with these other things that are there, also certain deities and certain, practices, you work for some time. And in that way, you purify as much as you can in this way the chakras, so that in deeper meditation, more easily your energy will move upward. So that is the less forceful method that there I would advise. Anyhow, since we are discussing with Chinnamasta the Kundalini energy, I like to say something also about Ida and Pingala, the solar and lunar energy, which we find there as these two Shaktis or attendants in the picture. This is, you could say, a very basic opposition. It is the most important duality of the manifested world. You can say that in the unmanifest there is a duality of consciousness and energy, right? Which often then is named Shiva and Shakti. And then the second duality is, of course, between the unmanifested and the manifested. But then when we are in the manifested, there is a third duality, which is between solar and lunar, which are often, and that is confusing, which are often also represented by Shiva and Shakti. But they are not the same thing as consciousness and energy. There's nothing actually to do with consciousness. These are just modes of energy. And to understand them, to study them is very interesting, because in a way everything that always moves in the universe, no? The energy which always changes in the universe, it changes within this duality of solar and lunar. And this duality is causing a lot of confusion and even causing a lot of discussion. And especially if I say then that the solar energy is more male and the female energy is more lunar, then we can really start a discussion, because then we are talking about, what makes males and females different, and how does this relate to each other. And a lot of discussions, you could say even in politics, are actually about solar and lunar. And a lot of discussions within families are between solar and lunar. Actually, most of the discussions that are going on inside our own mind are between solar and lunar. So I like to a little bit explain that. The main thing to understand, of course, is that solar and lunar, they are complementary. They balance each other out, and it is the wrong idea to ask which one is right or wrong. They are both needed. Together, they make a very good team. Because if we say the energy is always moving, then this move is like a dance from left to right. This is life. It is, how do you call that? A sling, something which, a pendulum, which always goes like this and this and this and this. That's life. So the change from male to female, or from solar to lunar, you could say from rational to emotional, that is the main, thing that is happening in the universe. It's also from hot, solar is hot, to cold, lunar is cold. So even in physics, that is the main thing. That's the main thing always. Temperature is so essential actually, in physics. It changes the state of substances, like ice melting to water, and ice melting to water when the temperature rises, and so all this is a very essential thing, and so the main thing is to understand that they are complementary, and that you don't need to ask yourself, is my rational thought right, or is my feeling right? If you can stop asking that question, you really, give yourself a big gift, because both have their own truth. And, you just have to then find the middle way, which is, Sushumna, the neutral way. Without, of course, always wanting to stay in the neutral. You cannot, You have to play. That is Leela, That is the game of life. And so we are all Ardnarishwara, half male, half female. And you can say some males are more female than some females, and some females are more male than some males, quite clearly. So it's not about males and females. Only in averages we can say, yes, maybe women are a little bit more emotional and men are a little bit more rational. Maybe men are more creative or want to do something, want to create something, while women more want to receive something, want to nurture something. But these are generalizations, and nobody should take it personal, and definitely not see it as a way to tell you what to do or something. No, it's not that. It's just a understanding that, generally speaking, in women the lunar energy is a bit more, and in males the solar energy is a bit more. And this has to do basically with these two hemispheres in the brain, one which is more rational, the other which is more emotional, one which prefers words, while the other prefers images. So that is known also in Western science. And so in that way we are Ardnarishwara, we are half male, half female, half Shiva, half Shakti, all. And this should not be a discussion, as I said, not within a couple also, but also not inside ourselves. Feeling and thinking are two sides of the same consciousness, energy game. They are two sides of the same coin, and ultimately it is in your heart, from neutrality, that you decide. We have talked about that also in the subject of Dharma, when you try to find out what is right and wrong, or which way should I go? Should I go this way or go that way? So then I advise you, okay, think about it. I also advise you, feel it. Try to see what you feel. And these two can, go together. You think about, maybe I go that way, and then you kind of feel what that kind of does to you, or, imagining that choice to be there or to be done, and then feeling, what does it mean? Okay. But ultimately, come to silence, come to neutrality, and then from there feel what is the right choice. That is a feeling which is going beyond these two. It's not about which one side is right. They are both right in their own way, but they are also limited. It is beyond that the truth. Whether we're talking about, the ultimate truth, or whether we're talking about, should I take that street or should I take that street? In both ways, there is someone knowing. But that is not the brain. It is deep in your soul that you know these things, that you have a connection to Buddhi, to the cosmic intellect, and that you know everything actually, without knowing it in a way, without knowing the details of it, without knowing, okay, if I take that street, that's going to happen and that's going to happen. Okay, maybe some people can actually also do that, they are very connected. But in most people, no. But okay, it feels right to take that street, so I'll take that street. And then we see what happens, and anyhow we accept what happens, and But so this discussion in our mind, I'm thinking this, but I'm feeling that, is endless. So go on thinking, go on feeling, and then stop both. Go to neutrality, which is the Sushumna Nadi, as much as you can, and then wait to see what answer comes from much deeper inside. If you want to stay in the brain kind of story, no? Which is coming here from behind. No? It's actually not the same thing, but let's not go there. No, it's not the same thing in the sense that it's not physical. No? It's beyond that. It's really in the soul. No? But so to bring a balance between these two is, of course, very interesting and very important in the process of yoga. We do that with, for example, alternate nostril breathing, no, which is very advisable. Where really, your mental ability to concentrate will be greatly increased if you can do some of this alternate nostril breathing every day. And your mental stability in general, I would say, will greatly be increased by that sort of practices. But it's also a matter of awareness of your own game, the game going on in your mind. And especially then when you feel in trouble in your mind, then remember, you can think what you want, you can feel what you want, but ultimately that is not where the answer is. The answer will come from silence. And thinking and feeling can be a preparation for that. I'm not excluding it at all. But they are not going to give you the answer. Because in some things, you will feel, rationally speaking, I really should be doing that. And then okay, I made up my mind, I'm going to do that. And then 2 minutes later already the doubt comes because you're feeling, no, I don't want to do that, So leave that game. Or let it, play its role, but don't rely on it, don't depend on it to decide. Use whatever methods work for you to bring as much silence as possible, and then from that neutral state just wait, see what answer comes, then don't think again, go on, move forward with it. And if afterwards you feel it was anyhow the wrong mistake, you can say God made a mistake. You are no longer responsible. That's actually one of the added benefits, my teacher used to say, of dealing with life in this way. This is a very different way to deal with life than people usually do. And he said this is one of the added benefits because you leave all decisions up to the Lord. And in this way you are no longer responsible. You don't feel like, what should I do? And if I make the wrong choice, what will happen? No. You accept. You accept this question is answered from somewhere beyond your brain. And so your brain is not responsible. And you trust that. Because of course, if you don't trust it, you can't work with it. If you do this and then afterwards anyhow you feel, no. No, once you start, you have to trust it. And accept whatever consequence is there. Whatever, let's say, God chooses may not be the easiest path, may not be the most comfortable path, but it is the right path. Anyway, to kind of finish off then the story about Chinnamasta, I also like to point out that this whole idea of working with Kundalini and with the chakras is in a way also something very simple. In one way, it is very special. It's one of the most special yogic techniques and stories, I would say. Very mysterious. But on the other hand, there's also not much of a mystery. And especially not if we feel, okay, whatever happens, happens. Now, as I said in deep meditation, Kundalini will rise automatically, so okay, let's just see. But we can just try to prepare ourselves for that. And that means that we need to have some basic way of dealing with these 5 chakras, no? With the lower chakras, the chakras that belong to the elements, so that there, at least in our way of living, in our behavior, in our way of thinking, we are not creating any obstructions. Because if we don't do that, then for sure it can never really work. No? So that means then, for example, in terms of first chakra, no? Which, okay, includes the fear of death, that is a tough one, but also includes a lot more than that. And especially the fear of financial problems, the fear of, getting into trouble with the material world. No? We often like to complain about that world, but it's, what makes everything possible. No? So the main thing is there that we have to respect this and be self-sufficient. That is the main, let's say, feeling that you need to have towards that issue of financial security. You don't rely on how much money you have on the bank, because that might devaluate, You don't rely on the properties that you have, because, lightning might strike them, and a big house gone. You don't rely on all these external things. You just rely on your own ability to make a living. You are self-sufficient means that, you've developed some skill, you've developed something that you can do, and which is valuable to others. So as long as you can be valuable in that way to others, somehow or other, your first chakra will be taken care of. Your fridge will not be empty. No? And that is a feeling, which is good to have. And I think most of you probably, have that ability, have that skill developed. And be aware of it. That is something, especially in our society, which is then enough, no? In older days, or maybe still in some very poor countries, even if you have a lot of skills, you might still die of hunger, no? Because the situation is very dire, and, But in most places, if you've developed a certain skill and, have your mind sufficiently under control so that you can also use this skill in proper way to give a good service to others, whatever it is, then your main issue with first chakra already, is taken away. And so whenever you think about that, just rely on that. Don't think how much money do I have, how much security do I have. No, just think, what can I do? Okay, people like it. Okay, good. I'll always, I'm ready to work. No? Everybody works. Plants work, animals work. Everybody works to some way, So that's all. And then that is done. And then when it comes to second chakra, there are also people sometimes they talk to me and they are very worried about their addictions or their inability to stop the senses and all that. And we have to there be also realistic and careful not to make too much of a big issue out of it. The only thing you really need to be able to do is to be a little moderate. You are a natural child, running around on this planet and enjoying a taste of this and the sight of that, and that is all very normal. No need to, be totally unrelated to that. Only need to be a little moderate. So whenever excess is there, okay, that you have to work with, because that'll bring your energy down quite fast. So then you fast, no? You abstain for a while until you have the control, and then you are moderate in it. No? Then when it comes to the third chakra, desire of being seen, being respected by others, then there also very easy solution. You don't need to, be on the cover of Time magazine or have a big business or a big title in your job or anything like that. To be respected by others, you only, need to be willing to help them. That's all. To serve society. You will always be respected if you do that. Maybe not by some stupid people, but who cares, but by people in general, by society in general. If you are a helpful person who is not only thinking me, but thinks a little bit also us, then automatically the respect you will have, and people will know you. That's all you need. So, and then we have the fourth, more difficult, of the heart, the feeling of connection to others and the weight of the suffering of others and the world, and how to deal with that. So there I say it's more difficult, because whatever we can do, we can be helpful, as I said, but still we have to surrender to it. We have to surrender to whatever happens. We have to surrender, let's say, to Kali, who is teaching us that whatever comes, it has to go. And you cannot stop it. Even if you are the most powerful person on the planet, you cannot stop it. So then you have to surrender. Whatever you are doing there, because naturally fourth chakra will also bring work for you, to help others, to support others, those you connect with, those you love. So, but at the same time you have to surrender whatever result is there of your actions to the divine, and accept that, okay, sometimes you build something and anyhow it cannot be sustained, it has to be destroyed, it has to go. Or you try to keep something alive and you can't. So that is a little more difficult. In a way, the higher up we go in the chakras, the more difficult it becomes. The lower chakras, actually, to deal with it basically, I'm not talking about ultimately. Ultimately, to deal with first chakra is about death. So, okay, tough one. But to basically deal with it is quite easy. But the higher up then you go, a little more difficult. And in fifth chakra then, the most difficult thing there is to accept the truth. Because that acceptance goes against all what you want. All other chakras, actually, they work against it. Because acceptance here means accept that you do not exist as an individual person. I've said this many times, there's no Peter Marchand. The guy doesn't exist. This is just a name for some temporary appearance in the universe. That's all. But there has no real existence, changes every day. Every day you get a new Peter Marchand. So that accepting of the ultimate truth in your own existence. Let's not talk about everybody else. Just in who you are and how you look at yourself, how you perceive yourself. To allow that truth of non-existence as an individual person to really rule your life, it's very hard. I struggle with that every day, and I think everybody does. It's very hard because, when you accept that, all other desires, they have to go. Because all other desires are of Peter Marchand. All other desires are for that one. And so when I think, oh yeah, but really, I'd like a cup of chai. Who wants that cup of chai, That's the point. He doesn't exist. He thinks he really needs a cup of chai. He thinks he really wants a cup of chai. He thinks he has the right to a cup of chai. But he doesn't exist. There's nobody there to have the right for a cup of chai. So that is then, bringing us again to Chinnamasta. Again to that more black and white way of looking, self, ego, and to, at least for a while, totally let go of that one who wants the cup of chai and who thinks he has a right to it. And to totally go for the ultimate experience, knowledge, or truth, whichever you want to call it. And then, okay, as I said, the ego can be reborn and rise as a phoenix from the ashes and become really the divine ego or the divine form. I've said it before in Kali's class. I think that whatever has form must always be incomplete, must always be untrue, must always be, I would say that, imperfect. Only the unmanifested can be perfect. Whatever male you are, you lack the qualities of a female, vice versa. This story. So, yeah, that is what Chinnamasta is about. Get out of that false identity, totally, burn it to the ground, cut it off, and okay, then meet the ultimate truth, the unmanifest. And then again, manifest, in which time then the ego, okay, it's still not perfect, but it is also no longer limited by its own idea. That is the main thing. It's actually just the same as before, but is no more limited by that idea of existing as a separate individual. So then you can say the I am this body and the I am not this body, they are there together. For the ego, the I am this body, anyhow, it has to be there. Otherwise, how can the body function? But both the I am this body and the I am not this body, they are in perfect harmony. There's no more discussion about it. So then, okay, we have reached that end point. And maybe last but not least, also I can say that working with this and working with Chinnamasta is supposed to bring the highest siddhis, the highest powers, the highest achievements, you can say, in terms of being able to do things which normally are not possible. They are magical in the sense that usually people don't understand it. They are not magical to the one who is actually doing it, but they are magical because they are beyond common understanding. And so there, yeah, you can get siddhi from any direction, there's many kinds, but here come the highest, the atomicity, all these really like extreme siddhis which allow you to be in two places at the same time, let's just say like this, these kind of things, they're very much associated with that. And many sadhus who are worshipping Chinnamasta are actually also doing it for that. Not just for, like sexual abstinence or reaching deeper states of Samadhi, but also for getting certain powers. So, okay, I think that's about it for Chinnamasta. And I don't know, if there's any questions about this or whatever. Now, for those who might not know, I think most people know, but it means you breathe in like to the left, and then you exhale to the right, and then again you inhale to the right, and then you exhale to the left like this, and using your fingers or not. I mean, different ways are there. But it should be done in upright position, not lying down. Actually, if you are lying down and you want to also do something like that, then much more easy, you just lie down on one side for 1 minute, and then you go to the other side for 1 minute, and then again. If your nose is quite unblocked, then automatically by lying on this side, that nostril will be opened, and if you lie on that side, then that nostril will be opened. If there's no, like mucus inside, this will work quite well. And that will have a much more strong effect than using the technique of alternate nostril breathing. No, meditative techniques can be used lying down, but the effect that we are seeking is always going to be less when lying down. But okay, like to do mantra lying down or to do some breathing lying down, this is all very good and very relaxing. That's the nice thing about it. Your body can be totally relaxed. So that also makes you more relaxed. So that makes it a little more easy. But to reach something a little higher, you have to be upright, because then, your alignment is totally different. You want the energy to rise up anyway. That is always what we're trying to do. And it cannot if you're lying down. So the spine must be straight. This is in all real meditation practices the case. Well, if our ojas is really low, we will have very low energy, especially very low stamina. So we may be able still to run for a short time, but not for a longer time. And one of the most typical ways to see it is in the skin, which loses like the natural radiance or luster, the shine. This is actually also what the word ojas means. It is a radiance or a shining like on the skin, a luster. So when a person really becomes very ill, then their skin looks very different. It becomes like deadish, like a dead body, not yet, but it comes a little bit more like that. So that is how you see it. And then, of course, if you have problems of continuous infections, continuous tiredness, lack of energy, then ojas is definitely one of the things to try. And with people who have chronic fatigue, I've prescribed, let's say, to do certain pranayamas with a lot of success. It really helps them, but they need to keep to it for 1 month, 2 months at least. It's not something which is solved in a day. You have to build it slowly, and at the same time also have some restraint in the use of the senses. Yeah, and especially all these screens, very tiring for the system, very tiring for the nerves, and in the whole body, the nerves are using the most of the ojas. Every cell needs some of it, but the nerve cells, they are the most using it. So whatever is tiring the nerves will consume ojas. And so the stronger the sensations that the nerves have, the more ojas gets consumed. And the more nervous we become, also the more ojas is consumed. So also in that way, the people who have chronic fatigue, they have to try to stay very calm. Not get excited, not get worried about it. It's not easy. But then, okay, they can use some mantra also or some other things, and yeah, stay calm. Because to not do that is, yeah, often why they stay in that state. Because normally speaking, if you are a little bit tired because you've been working very hard, and you then take a break, and you take a week or you take 2 weeks, maybe a holiday, and you don't work much, and you eat properly. Proper fresh food is also a factor there. You do some walks in nature, then normally the ojas, it will replenish itself, and the younger you are, also the more easily. But in some of these people, then that does not work, because they continue worrying. They are in a holiday, but the mind is not yet in a holiday. And then, they really need to properly relax the mind. And some wellness can help with that. For those who don't have so much of a meditation experience. And then maybe also there teach them some things, so that they learn to properly relax the mind. And then ojas can again start restoring itself. It is something my teacher always said, it's very easy to lose, very hard to gain. So that you see. Sometimes people from quite young age, for example, they are of the partying type, and they party a lot for many years, and they seem fine. They don't sleep enough. They maybe use also intoxicants, which are also, of course, going to consume a lot of ojas, because they very much stimulate the nervous system, and they are not going to eat proper food and so on. But they'll be fine until one day when they are no more fine. And then it will be very hard to come back to a natural level which corresponds to their age, let's say. It will be very hard to rebuild that. So you always have to be a little bit conscious about it. And it is not because your health is good that it does not need any care. Because the degradation, you can say, of your health, which is also essentially a degradation of your ojas, it can happen without you really noticing. Until then, I would not say it's too late, but it's rather late. And then it's more difficult. So take good care, especially you young people, as you get older, anyhow, it becomes less. You have less energy, you have less, let's say, speed to regenerate inside your system. If you get ill, maybe you need longer time to recover. You have a little bit of pain here and there, which somehow you have to learn to live with. This is old age, no? That's why reincarnation is such a beautiful thing, no? Because at some point you're like, okay, let's restart the program. But if you are in your 20s, 30s, take good care and don't overexert yourself. This society is very much creating that feeling that you are able and even required to totally spend all your energy and work as hard as you can, and if you're done working, party as hard as you can. That's the wrong way. For a good life, it's the wrong way. Moderation. Yes, because sexual energy is also an energy, no? And so there also, like you can say, with every orgasm, quite a lot of energy is consumed. And that's okay. I mean, it's life. But it is less than with the men because of the sperm. And that difference is quite big. Like if you look in the real tantric sex, and with that I mean not the Western style, but like the real original practice there. Now you have these, let's call them yogis and yoginis, no, who are working together. Then it is known that for the male retention, no, the holding of the orgasm is more important than for the female. But still, for the female, it is also advised, no? Okay, to build up the energy, yes, to be very aroused, let's say, but then to hold it, no, and not spend it. That is definitely there. There, the procedure, let's say, definitely for the man, no, is to ejaculate and then again absorb, no, the sperm. That is the real technique, no? Which is something very difficult. It would be first trained by using oil or some other liquid, but ultimately oil, because it has also a thickness, no? And then, yeah, it's not easy. Yeah? You have to learn to really like suck it up through the penis. No, it's not easy to learn that. But anyway. There's many different ways, maybe also different traditions, different, why not, opinions. But the main thing in, let's say, tantric sex will always be for both partners to bring the energy there. No, quite definitely the sexual energy is there, but it is not spent. And you are keeping there and ultimately offering this energy to the divine. No? And in that way, the soul not spending it, no? Because otherwise you're offering it and then you're consuming it yourself, no? Yeah. It's like some people, they will offer a big plate of fruits and then they will eat all of it. It's not supposed to be like that. Some prasad, no, can be there. Some offering of whatever you have been offering to the gods can then be shared because, okay, gods everywhere, blah, blah, blah. But at least the main part should remain, no? So, but here in this case, definitely that is the main thing. And that is something that any couple can do, without any special guidance. You can make it more powerful with special guidance, of course, but that is really the main thing, no? That you are keeping the energy, no? In coitus, no? You are keeping the energy alive, no? But you are offering it by using mantra to the divine, no? Yeah. And that can be very powerful.